Well, you've been sending in your questions to us on the government's roadmap to easing the lockdown in England and also the possibility of a summer holiday abroad. With me is Dr. Bharat Pankhania, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, and also we are joined by Lisa Minot, Travel Editor for the Sun newspaper. Welcome to you both. Lots of questions having been sent in, emailed and texted. Can I start with you, Dr. Pankhania, Bharat Pankhania? Will the COVID jab be like the flu jab, Graham asks? Will we need one every year now?
No, Graham, I hope not. The evidence shows that our immunity to a coronavirus COVID infection is probably longer lasting than 12 months. Therefore, maybe we may need vaccinations every 3 years or so, depending on the emergence of awkward variant versions of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. But otherwise, I don't think it will be an annual thing.
But could we get boosters?
Again, it will be a case of if immunity is found to be dropping, and I think immunity isn't going to drop within the first year. So maybe at the 2-year, 3-year stage, we may need boosters.
OK, Lisa, a travel question now. Huge uptake in holidays overnight, yes, according to some of the airlines and other travel companies. Ian in Barnsley says, what are the travel restrictions from March? That's crucial, from March. Can you travel to see grandchildren in another part of England?
Well, at the moment, the answer to that is no. From March the 29th, though, we moved from the stay home message to stay local. So, I mean, the idea being that you don't have to stay at home, but the definition of local, that probably isn't moving yourself from one part of the country to the next. And overnight stays are still not allowed. So it would have to be somewhere that you could get to in a quite close proximity.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The definition of local, 5 miles, 7 miles, 10 miles, but maybe not 50.
Exactly.
No, OK. Bharat, this is from John. Will businesses still have to COVID clean their area and offices following suspected positive cases?
Oh, yes, you must. And actually, in addition to this cleaning business that a lot of people assiduously do, can I make a plea that we really must increase ventilation in your indoors offices? Ventilation is the key to reducing the number of infections. We must address cleaning, but please attend to increased ventilation as well. It's very important.
OK. Another travel question for you, Lisa. This is from John Grant in Worcestershire. And I imagine this will affect a lot of people who have already pre-booked their summer holidays, hoping that the pandemic will be over or the lockdown will have been eased. He says, we have a holiday to Greece booked to travel on the 4th of June. Will overseas holiday travel start before that date?
Well, we just don't know. What we've been told by the government is that on April the 12th, the travel task force that is looking at reopening international travel will report back on its findings. And we've been told that the absolute earliest holidays abroad could start would be May the 17th. But there's still some risk that I think it could actually stretch back further than that to the third date we have, which is the 21st of June, when travel in the UK becomes something that can be for everybody, no matter what the size of your household, etc. It's going to be very tight to see if that will actually be allowed to Greece at that time. I'm hoping it will, but it will be tight.
We've been discussing passports, vaccination passports. Let's stay with that story, Lisa, because some countries are already saying, aren't they, that actually if they are going to allow people in, that they will want to see proof that people have been vaccinated.
That's right. And what we don't have at the moment is any idea from the government as to whether or not they are going to be coming up with their own version of a vaccination passport, or whether there's any kind of global agreement as to what that passport could look like. But you already have airlines trialling their own types of vaccine passports at the moment, apps that perhaps could also have the information about any negative COVID tests you've taken on it. So it really is going to be a case of waiting to see what this travel task force decides and what we will have to do going forward.
And for medical workers, Bharat, this is from David Owen in Southport. In future, will care homes make it mandatory for all staff to be vaccinated against the virus?
I think it may go that way. I was looking at the examples of we immunize and make sure our healthcare workers are immunized against hepatitis B and BCG against TB, especially if they work in a sensitive area. Taking that analogy further, I would think it is good practice and it would almost become like a prerequisite, a terms and conditions of service to be immunized, to be fully immunized against all other infectious diseases as well as SARS-CoV-2 infections.
Okay. Lisa, this is from Robert in Hertfordshire. International travel. How will cruise ship crew, flight crew, hotel staff be protected in time for the resumption of travel arrangements?
Well, it's something that cruise companies are already working on right now. Royal Caribbean have said that they intend to vaccinate all of their crew before they restart cruising. And we have airlines like Emirates who've already launched a flight where every single member of the team, from the check-in staff to the engineers and the people in the loading bays to the pilots and the crew on board, had all been vaccinated. But this is going to be a big challenge. You know, we've got a huge number of people that will need to be vaccinated, and it's not going to be like that across the board. You know, it really is going to be very specific. Sector support will need to be put in place, I think, before you can see that happening across the board.
Just occurred to me, actually. I mean, so many ships, so many cruise liners were caught up in this pandemic
Yes.
the first time. What's happened to that whole industry?
That whole industry is on pause. Tragically, you know, it really has suffered terrible losses, and is still waiting to find out whether or not governments across the world will actually allow them the resumption of travel. There has been a limited amount of travel that has restarted in terms of cruising. We saw MSC cruising around Italy. It's an Italian cruise line, and they were just calling it Italian ports and only had Italians on board. And we've also seen some cruises restart in the Far East as well. But as of yet, at the moment, the Foreign Office here is advising against all but essential, well, against cruise travel altogether.
All right, okay. Barrett, this is from Rhian in Wales. Will I be able to go out and about as normal after I've had my second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine?
No, you need to exercise the constrictions and the restrictions that are advised at the time, even if you've had your 2 vaccines. So what will happen long term, thinking forward, is when a sufficient percentage of the population have been immunized, those restrictions will come down. But just because the at-risk groups are being immunized, it doesn't mean you drop your guard and you just carry on as if you've got a invisible shield around you. We must remember that the vaccine prevents you from getting severe illness. That means it stops you getting into hospital and hopefully not dying. But what it cannot do in all cases is prevent mild to moderate illness. So if you are vaccinated and you get mild or moderate illness, you could be infected and infectious to other people. Therefore, it's important, even after you have been immunized, to continue wearing your mask and continue to take all infection control measures until all cases in the country have come down.
And just as a rider to that, those people who had their first jab perhaps end of December, beginning of January, who initially thought it was the second dose was going to be in 3 or 4 weeks, now 2 or 3 months, the advice to them, they must go and have that second jab if they're offered it?
Oh, absolutely. And the first jab is what we would call the primer. It's given your immune system a wake-up call that I need you to make immunity against me. And then the second jab is what we would call the booster. It's reminding your immune system that you need to really remember me and really make immunity against me. So the second dose is very important for boosting purposes and inducing what I would call long-term immunity.
Okay, fun one for you, Lisa, from Hannah in Sweden. My boyfriend, she says, lives in England. I live in Sweden and I'm a Swedish citizen. When can I come to England to see him again?
Well, I mean, we are really looking at this same idea as to when we're going to have the resumption of international travel. Sweden isn't one of those countries at the moment. I don't think it is on the red list, but I'm not entirely sure. I would have to double check that. Obviously, people coming into the country from those red list countries are having to hotel quarantine at quite a significantly high cost. But I think it will really probably be at about the same time as we are allowed to travel abroad that you will see that resumption of people coming into the UK as well, but obviously only from a limited number of countries.
All right. OK. Lisa Minot and Dr. Bharat Pankania, thank you both very much, as always.
Thank you.